Most business problems don't announce themselves. They don't arrive with urgency. They don't interrupt your calendar. They don't force emergency meetings or dramatic decisions. They settle in quietly. They live inside routines. They live inside habits. They live inside decisions that once made sense and were never questioned again. And because they don't feel threatening, they're rarely examined. Many business owners believe that if something were truly wrong, it would be obvious. Sales would collapse. Customers would complain loudly. Systems would fail in visible, undeniable ways. But the problems that limit growth most often don't behave like that. They don't break the business. They slowly shape it. They influence how the business feels to run. They influence how much effort decisions require. They influence how heavy leadership becomes over time. And because none of this feels dramatic, it's easy to miss. This is how businesses become busy without becoming better. Work is happening. People are moving. Revenue is coming in. Yet momentum feels inconsistent. Progress feels fragile. Growth feels heavier than expected. Not because the business is failing, but because effort has quietly replaced clarity. Effort is powerful. It fills gaps. It smooths over rough edges. It keeps things moving when systems aren't ready yet. Effort prevents collapse. Effort buys time, but effort also hides truth. Because when effort works, it removes the need to ask why effort is required in the first place. And the longer effort compensates, the more invisible the underlying issue becomes. Most founders are exceptionally capable. They adapt quickly. They solve problems instinctively. They step in when something doesn't work. That capability is often what allowed the business to grow in the first place. But over time, it becomes a hidden cost. Because the more capable you are, the easier it is to carry friction silently instead of eliminating it. You absorb complexity. You bridge gaps. You make things work behind the scenes. And slowly, the business learns to rely on you doing that. This is where blind spots form. A blind spot isn't ignorance. It's familiarity. It's the thing you stop noticing because it's always been there. The extra step that shouldn't exist. The conversation that keeps repeating. The decision that always comes back to you. The delay that feels unavoidable. None of these feel urgent on their own. But together, they create drag. Drag doesn't stop a business, it slows it. It adds weight to decisions. It increases mental load. It drains energy quietly, day after day. And because drag doesn't announce itself, leaders often internalize the cost. They assume they're not disciplined enough. They assume they need better focus. They assume they just need to push harder. But pushing harder against drag doesn't remove it. It only makes the push more exhausting. This is why so many capable leaders feel tired even when things are going well. They're not tired because they're failing. They're tired because they're compensating. They're catching problems that shouldn't exist anymore. They're clarifying things that should already be clear. They're making decisions that should be obvious. And none of that shows up on a report. Being inside a business every day narrows perspective. You see what's urgent. You respond to what's loud. You focus on what needs attention now. And slowly, without realizing it, you stop seeing the whole picture. You stop noticing patterns. You stop questioning assumptions. You stop asking whether the way things work still makes sense. Not because you don't care, but because proximity changes perception. Proximity creates blindness. Just like you stop hearing background noise after a while. You stop noticing friction once you've learned how to work around it. You adapt. You adjust. You normalize what shouldn't be normal. And that's when growth plateaus. Not dramatically. Quietly. Most businesses don't need radical change. They need visibility. Visibility into where effort is compensating for clarity. Visibility into where repetition is signaling structure. Visibility into where silence is hiding cost. Because what isn't seen still shapes behavior. Unseen friction still influences decisions. Unseen complexity still drains energy. Unseen gaps still slow momentum. Clarity doesn't come from more information. It comes from observation. Observation of patterns. Observation of repetition. Observation of moments where things slow down without a clear reason. These observations don't demand immediate action. They simply reveal reality. And reality, when seen clearly, has a calming effect. When you understand why something keeps happening, it stops feeling personal. You stop blaming yourself. You stop blaming others. You stop reacting emotionally. You begin to see the business as a system that responds predictably to how it's designed. And understanding restores a sense of control. This is where leadership changes. From doing to seeing. From reacting to recognizing. From carrying to designing. The business begins to feel lighter, not because less is happening, but because less effort is being wasted. Energy is no longer spent compensating. It's spent intentionally. Clarity also changes how time feels. Days feel less frantic. Decisions feel less rushed. Even uncertainty feels more manageable. Not because everything is solved, but because fewer things are misunderstood. Many leaders fear this moment of clarity. They worry it will expose mistakes. They worry it will demand uncomfortable changes. They worry it will confirm doubts they've avoided. But clarity doesn't accuse, it explains. And explanation replaces anxiety with confidence. Confidence isn't loud, it doesn't rush, it doesn't overcorrect, it doesn't panic. Confidence grows quietly when leaders understand what's actually happening, and that understanding allows them to respond instead of react. As clarity deepens, leaders begin to notice subtle shifts. They intervene less, they listen more, they ask better questions, they stop filling silence. They allow space for insight to surface. And insight thrives in space. Space allows patterns to emerge naturally. It allows assumptions to be questioned. It allows systems to reveal their limits. Without space, everything feels immediate. With space, everything becomes visible. Over time, clarity begins to compound. Small insights stack. Patterns become familiar. Decisions become simpler, not because the business is smaller, but because confusion no longer dominates attention. The business starts to feel quieter, not empty, not inactive, but quieter in the sense that noise fades, less second-guessing, less unnecessary urgency, less emotional drag. And in that quiet, confidence grows. Confidence changes how leaders show up. They're steadier, they're more present, they're less reactive. They don't rush to fix, they don't chase every signal. They trust their understanding. This is the difference between effort-driven leadership and clarity-driven leadership. One relies on constant input. The other relies on awareness. One exhausts over time, the other sustains. The business begins to support the leader instead of consuming them. It becomes something that can be guided, not something that must be held together. That shift is subtle, but deeply meaningful. It's the difference between holding everything up and watching something stand on its own, between survival powered by effort and stability supported by structure. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It unfolds gradually, with each insight noticed, with each pattern recognized, with each assumption questioned. Clarity compounds, and it always begins the same way, not with action, not with strategy, not with solutions, but with seeing. Final reflection. As you move through today, return to this question gently. What am I compensating for that clarity could resolve? Don't answer it, don't solve it, just notice where it appears, because noticing is the doorway. And once that doorway opens, the business no longer has to be carried alone.